This is breaking news.
Westchester County Executive George Latimer is giving an update on the power outages due to the tropical storm. Let's go to it now.
We know that the storm had impacts all across the metropolitan area. I'm sure what we covered today is probably not going to be much different than what you'd hear in Nassau County and Fairfield County, Connecticut, throughout the counties of northern New Jersey, Rockland County. The whole region was affected by this storm, as it was when it came up through the Carolinas once it made landfall. Our situation includes some basic statistics that we have as of 8 o'clock this morning, and that is that in Westchester County, the two major utilities that provide electricity are Con Edison and New York State Electric and Gas, NYSE&G. Con Edison provides about 90% of the customers in the county, and NYSEG does about 10% in the county. And if you have a visual map in your mind of Westchester County, the NYSEG service area goes right along the northern border of Westchester County from Cortland in the west over to North Salem, Pound Ridge in the east, and it goes down maybe about one town and then deep, and then from that point all the way down to the Bronx borderline is Con Edison, and so obviously Con Edison is a much larger player. We are told that Con Edison has 360,000 customers in Westchester County, and NYSEG has 33,000 customers in Westchester County, and that as of 8 a.m. this morning, Con Edison reported that 77,081 customers were without power. That comes out to about 21%, and NYSEG reports 25,880 customers out of 33+ thousand. That puts them about a 78% number. Now, these are numbers that the utilities have provided us. They're 8 o'clock in the morning numbers. We're here now a couple of hours after that point, so there may have been some progress made on both of those cases. We will take their numbers as the factual numbers for the moment, but part of our responsibility is to be in touch with the different municipalities around the county and determine what the impact is from community to community to community. When the utilities report customers, they are not necessarily reporting individuals. A customer could be a commercial customer as well as a residential customer. A customer might involve more than one person benefiting by the connection of that electricity. It may be less multiple family in an apartment building versus single family homes. Westchester, obviously, like most places like ours, has a diverse environment, diverse topography. We have concentrated urban areas: Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, White Plains, Peekskill. We have villages that are urban concentrations, and then we have wide swaths of suburban environment. Doesn't quite reach rural as we know rural in upstate New York, but the areas in the northeastern part of the county, Lewisboro, Pound Ridge, North Salem, Somers, are much larger areas, and the different users on different pieces of land may have a setback from the main road of the community. So there's a different reality in trying to deal with all of the diverse parts of Westchester County. There was no question that we knew that Hurricane Isaias was coming. It took us a while to figure out how to pronounce the name, but it didn't take us long to see the storm as it was forming in the Caribbean, in the Atlantic, as it passed over the Bahamas and what it did there, and discussions about when and where it would affect Florida coast, where it might make landfall in the Carolinas. So we all knew this was coming. This was not a complete surprise out of nowhere. The county had a conversation with our municipal officials on Monday afternoon at 3:30, and then Tuesday morning we had an emergency operations center conversation with a number of our different colleagues in the different entities, agencies, to check down if people felt they were ready for this. And then also there was utility calls on Tuesday as the day went along. It's going to be disingenuous for anybody involved to say this surprised us. It surprised us because of the severity of it, but the fact that it was coming was not a surprise. Now, and I repeat what I understand to be true, because I'm not a meteorologist nor a scientifically inclined person. But the hurricane winds move in a clockwise fashion. And as they move from west to east, the heavy rain, the water content, is dumped off to the west of the storm, and the high winds are on the east side of the storm. If it rotates, as you imagine it, rotating around an eye in the middle. That means that the areas to our west, northern New Jersey, Rockland County, got a heavy amount of water. Everything I've read about northern New Jersey's problems were inland flooding, and that was their concern. The winds, once the water is dumped, as the winds continue in the circular motion, brings high winds to the right or the east side of the hurricane. and that meant Westchester County. We originally anticipated that the great problem of this storm would be on the Sound Shore, which is in essence where we are now. We're still a couple of miles from the Long Island Sound, but the coastal communities of Westchester County, Portchester through New Rochelle and Pelham, would be in the greatest jeopardy because of how the winds would flow, and also we were concerned about coastal flooding, which would happen on the Long Island Sound side as opposed to the rising river flooding on the west side of the county. So our concerns were for the low-lying areas along the Sound Shore. As it turned out, as the storm manifested itself, as it came through the area, a couple of things notable. It was a fast-moving storm. I'm told it moved at 45 miles an hour, which is very fast for a storm to move.
All right, Johnny, still there? All right, we'll do some track first. Okay, let me know if. Go ahead, Alice. They're speeding.
Comes around, gets underneath the tree becomes Mary Poppins and lifts up, and if the roots in a soggy ground can't hold, the trees collapse. And that is, as has been explained to me, I'm trying to explain it in layman terms, why we had so many trees collapse. And as they did, they brought down power lines and communication lines with them. We are now almost exactly 2 days from the impact of the storm. Certainly everybody who is inconvenienced or worse from the loss of power, the loss of telephone, the loss of internet services are anxious to have it back immediately. But as happened in past storms, the greater immediate problem is the lack of not just communications, but predictability about how long it will take for power to be restored. If people can have some sense of reliable information about when power is going to be restored, how soon or how long that's going to take, they can make rational decisions. You know, it can fall into the category of you can go stay at your sister and brother-in-law's place if you're without power and they have power. You might make a decision one way or the other about how you're going to allocate your time if you have the proper information. And we have to be realistic. Here in Westchester County, we have a lot of folks who in their various fields of endeavor are very important people. They're very successful people. They're not accustomed to being told things as much as they want to have input, and they want to be able to know things and not just be told things. It is difficult, certainly, for the utility companies to make certain predictions, but in the lack of being able to make predictions, not communicating at all, or being just generally vague, we don't know, by next week, you buy yourself time and you say, well, by next Tuesday everything will be up. That's not an acceptable answer to people who have to make decisions in practical terms. Now, we know that you're not going to get every tree that's fallen chopped up and out of the way. But but there has to be some priority structure to it. And that priority structure has to be communicated with the local government, because the next thing, and if this is repetitious, if you've heard this before, I'll apologize, but let me just walk you through what happens in the normal process when a tree falls and takes power lines down. The first thing that has to happen is the utility companies has to go out and make an assessment of the incident. Imagine any tree behind me falling. Someone has to go out with knowledge of utilities, looking at the wires that may have been involved. They know where the wires are on the pole. They know which wire is the power wire. They know which wire is the telephone wire or the internet wire, whatever else might be strung up there. And they look at the specific situation and they make an assessment about how hard it will be to clear this up, to restring the wires. In some cases, when a telephone pole goes down, there has to be a new pole put into place. Ultimately, you might be able to do a temporary fix, but the permanent fix will come with a new telephone pole. You'd have to order the telephone pole, and you've made your assessment. This is what it will take to fix that particular problem. Multiply that by 1,000 incidents, however many incidents there are. And this is one of the frustrations that we'll have in county government. We don't have direct responsibility in community A or community B, but there has to be an accumulation of this information, so that priorities can be done in a way that is rational, that everybody who understands who may be waiting, why they're waiting in comparison to somebody else who's getting the emergency services. The first step is to make the assessment. The second step is when you know that you're going to fix this particular incident, a crew has to go in from the utility company and cut off the power. And cut off the power from whatever portion of the grid that the wires that are down serve. And they have to be done professionally, because obviously you're dealing with high voltage, and severe injury and death can follow if you don't do that professionally. You have to cut the power off. That is the responsibility of the utility. Assessment and cut off the power. The step that follows that is the step that municipal governments have. It is our DPW crews, our meaning towns, villages, cities, to some degree, the county, where applicable, the state, where the DPW crew comes in with the power off, moves the wires, and then gets the impediment out of the way. Chops up, that's the buzz saws, chop up the tree, chop up the pole, move it, get it out of the way so it's clear. And in some cases it's not easy, depending on the girth of the tree, the age of the tree, the branches, what else it's impacted, how the root structure fell. I've seen them across a fence, and you'd have to figure out how to divorce the tree from the fence in order to move the rest of the tree. It is a tricky process and a time-consuming process, and you're not going to say, hey, Pete, Joe, Jane, go out there and do this in the next hour, and then as soon as you finish that, we're going to send you to the next place for the next hour. Each one of these incidents is going to take time. That's why the assessment up front is important, and that's why communicating that assessment through municipal officials, fire departments, emergency services are critical. So the DPW crew comes out, removes the impediment, and then a separate utility team comes out, bucket truck, to reestablish the connection. And the bucket truck, because they're going to have to go up since the wires are overhead, whether they have a temporary pole is needed, whether they can use an existing pole, whatever other kinds of mechanisms they have to restring the wires, that's what happens in the third step. I've always found it a bit disingenuous when someone tells me, well, the utility company told me that until the impediment is removed by the city, we can't reestablish the connection. That is true. What it leaves out is the first step of the process, which is the utility has to come out and shut the power off. So it begins with the utility as well as it ends with the utility. Now, people report this. I don't accuse anybody. I just deal with whatever I'm told. But what I'm told is sometimes that piece of information is delivered in a way to make people think it's the local government that somehow hasn't done its job, and we're just waiting for the local government to take the tree out of the way. Happy to take the tree out of the way when the power is cut off. So that's the dance that you go through, and with each incident. And depending on how complicated, I've seen situations as I've driven around the county where 2 trees have collapsed, sometimes in different directions, taking down a series of wires. I don't underestimate how hard it is to do this. So the next question that has to be asked, and this is the question we ask today, and ultimately the Public Service Commission has to ask, is what amount of manpower did you have at the ready to be able to do the utility function? And by the way, you could certainly ask, what did we have, local governments, what manpower did we have at the ready to be able to go out with our DPW crews? One of the questions for the county government, the narrow circumstance of what I'm responsible for as the head of the county government, we're responsible for the Bronx River Parkway's maintenance. We're responsible for the Grasslands Valhalla campus, where the county jail is. The medical center is there, although we don't run the medical center. We have other offices and operations at there. We're responsible for the ongoing protection of that particular area. And then we're responsible for the various parks around Westchester County. Now, you were looking at one of our parks, a golf course. Somewhere out in the middle of that golf course, there's not going to be any power wires, but there could very well be a tree down. If a tree falls in a park setting like this, that is not an emergency to be removed. But if a tree falls on a county park, proximate to a road that people use, proximate to private property, if it takes down wires, then that becomes a priority effort for the county government. And that's what our crews have been responsible for doing. The first most important area that has to be cleared are the major roadways, and then secondarily, the secondary roadways, because you need to have roads cleared so that fire trucks and emergency vehicles can get through them. And I certainly take the attitude, if we take the first day after a storm to make sure all of our major roads are cleared, that is as, if not more important, than every single person being able to come back online. But you have to be sure that those major roads are cleared. I talked with Ivy Poole, the supervisor of Newcastle. She had a number of her roads that were still blocked. Some of the people that I spoke to, Mayor Gina Piccinich of Mount Kisco, indicated that her roads were clear. Steve Altieri, the town administrator for the town of Mamaroneck, indicated that most of his roads were clear, but he still had some major roads like Fenimore Road that was not clear from the thruway to the Scarsdale border. They put a lot of emphasis yesterday in getting Weaver Street cleared. Weaver Street's a major road that connects Scarsdale and ultimately White Plains down to the Sound Shore, right off of the Hutchinson River Parkway. So that effort yesterday was an important effort. Some progress was made. But the biggest problem of communication is being able to make the assessment, identify all of the different incidents where the trees go down. There's a tree down, imaginarily, not actual case. Right across the street, there's a little cul-de-sac street called Glenbrook Place. It's in the city of Yonkers. Someone has to log 2 trees down on Glenbrook Place. One is a half a block in from North Street. The other is at the back of the cul-de-sac. That would be identifying a specific incident, 2 incidents, and all those incidents have to be added up in either of the service areas, identified and then prioritized. And that information must be conveyed to local government in a timely fashion. Then, if I were the mayor of White Plains or councilman of White Plains, somebody calls me up, what are you going to do on Glenbrook Place? I can explain to them where it is in the list of priorities, and if it is going to be a delay, they may not want to hear the answer, but it's not, we don't know, everybody will be back by next Tuesday. That's not an intelligent, acceptable answer. And I'm going into some specificity on this because you'll cover any of us in public office. And I did this 2 years ago when I got upset when I heard what I called corporate speak. I spent 20 years in corporate life. I work for subsidiaries of some major corporations. I know corporate speak when I hear it, which is a vague way of saying I'm not going to be specific with you because I don't want to commit to something that you're going to hold me to later on. And that's when I lost my temper a couple of years ago. And obviously in the world of politics, people evaluate that and, he put on a show. No, I didn't put on a show. I was legitimately angry at the time I lost my temper because I knew what had to happen. There had to be this kind of specificity. You had to explain it. You had to be able to justify it. If I decided as a citizen, I got out of my car and I drove over to see this thing, then I could say, yes, that is a mess. I can see why that has to be done. There's a nursing home on the block. That clearly has more priority than my cul-de-sac with 4 houses. But the upshot of all of these things is that this type of specificity is not traditionally what a utility company wants to do, or for that matter, any corporation. They want to hold the cards close to the vest. They want to allocate the manpower as they see fit and the equipment they see fit. Now, what the PSC is going to have to determine is, were these utilities and the other utilities, these aren't the only 2 utilities affected in New York State by this storm, did they have enough manpower at the ready? And did they have access to additional manpower as would be necessary? Because this system works in the way that our local fire department works on mutual aid with other electrical utilities in the region. This particular incident was the path of a storm that had a certain track to it. And if you went so many miles west, if you went east, you're in the ocean. But if you went so many miles west, parts were not affected by the storm. So the logical reality is you're a utility serving this area, you reach out to the utilities that are unaffected by this emergency, and you call up somebody in, I don't know, Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, Western New York. Joe, this is George. I'm responsible over here in Westchester County. We got hammered. We need men. How many can you give me? Can you fly them in? And how many of those people can you get how quickly? The whole purpose of what we went through 2.5 years ago was to try to codify that process so we wouldn't find out, oh my God, it's 2 days after the storm or a day after the storm, and we need a lot of folks to be in here. And how are we going to get them? And under what circumstances are we going to get them? Now, I'm making nothing accusatorily in what I'm saying, but I'm laying out a process for which we have to evaluate were the right decisions made. Why? Because we have a lot of angry residents. We have a lot of angry taxpayers. We have people who pay high utility costs, as they pay everything high in this area, and they have an expectation of getting the service they need. And when it happens in the middle of the summertime and it's hot and you have no way to cool yourself at night, if it happens and you're working at home and now your business connection goes down and you were working on something that was important for your business need and now you don't know how you're going to satisfy that deadline that your business has in place. You're dealing with a relative who's living in your home that needs oxygen. They need the electrical connection in order to provide them the health care. All of these things become part of the individual human realities that aren't codified if I say 21% out, we're going to restore 15% tomorrow. They're human stories. And those of us in public office hear those stories. People who are frustrated try to reach out to the utilities directly. And to the greater extent or the lesser extent, they get through to somebody. And if they don't get through to anybody, they're beyond angry. And if they do get through to somebody, they're probably dealing with somebody in a telemarketing setting who's fairly low in the totem pole, who can't commit to anything. You tell your tale of woe to that person, they absorb it, and what they say is, we'll get back to you. We'll see what you can do. And in some ways, that's the same challenge that our municipal officials are having. Our village mayors, our city mayors, and our town supervisors, they now have liaisons from the utilities based in their location, which is one of the things that we wanted, and we see that that's in place. But that person is not empowered to make a decision. They're just conveying information. And if senior management is holding the cards close to the vest, let's see what we have to do right now and how we're going to allocate resources, the liaison that's sitting inside town hall doesn't have the ability to change those priorities. They'll absorb it as an input, but the decisions are still being made here in terms of how these things are going to happen. And that creates a problem for the municipalities because in that dance, the second step of the dance is the effort by the local government. Do you keep people on hold? Do you know whether you're going to be using them at 7 o'clock at night when the power is finally turned off? How do we know? How do we know which incidents we're going to be dealing with? Most of our communities, our bigger cities, have more manpower, but they also have more incidents. A city the size of Yonkers, Mike Spano, he governs a city of 200,000 people. It's almost a quarter of the county, and it's large and extensive. You can go 7 miles from one end of his community to the other end of his community. He's got a problem on McLean Avenue. He's got a problem on East Grassy Sprain Road, and that's not do this project, do the next one. That's back and forth across a major community. And I take up the battle of our local governments because I served as a municipal official in the beginning of my career in the city of Rye, and because I have tried very hard in my public career to be close to those local governments. For those of you who cover Westchester County, you're in touch with those local officials. You know how much they care about their communities. We're not talking about, people in the United States Senate for 5 terms. They've served 30 years in public office. Everybody knows their name. You're talking about town supervisors and mayors, underpaid, in some cases no salary, who do what they do because they care about their community. They want to see something happen. And they're the ones on the firing lines that get, for every call I get, they get 20 of those calls. And they don't have an answer for them. And they need to have an answer. Within the context of what has to happen today, and it has to happen today, we need to be able to identify every incident of a tree that's down and power lines that are out. No excuses, no exceptions. I could get in my car as one person, and I could come up with 50 or 60 of these incidents between now and nightfall by just driving up and down the streets of these cities that I know so well. And I'd make a note, you know, on this street, this, and that. We need those kinds of things identified, and the local governments with the utilities need to have a complete checklist of all the things that have to happen. If somebody were to say at the end of this, I talked to Con Ed and they have that list together, I'd say, good, send me a copy of it so we have it. And by the way, send it to you guys in the press so that the people of the community would know, because you're the voice that will extend it to them faster than I can send out an email. But we have to look at every one of those incidents so we know what is the universe of what we're trying to solve. And then, given the amount of manpower that's allocated to it, a reasonable expectation in some priority order that will give people comfort as to when something is going to be up or not up. That's the task. It's not that complicated. It's hard to do because an incident will take time and energy by professional people to remove the obstruction and to rewire the power. I don't think that's going to be easy at all. It's not a job I could do. And I watch the men and women as well, but I watch those that do this, and they're up in the air, they're harnessed up, and they're attaching high voltage wires to. But this is not an easy job to ask these people to do. But the people who are affected by it need to know when can they realistically expect that to happen within a time frame. You know, you've all had the service person that says, "I'll be at your house sometime between 9 to 5." Well, that gives you a really good time frame to know when you're going to take time off of work to be able to be there when the person comes. Narrow it down, give us a realistic time frame, and if it's going to be Friday, it's because you've laid it out and Friday is the realistic day. It's not like, go away kids, you bother me, Friday. Because when Friday comes along, then it becomes Tuesday, and then tempers are frayed. In terms of authority and control, I know you all know this already, but it's worth expressing it. The utilities do not report to the county executive or the mayor or the town supervisor or the village mayor. They don't report to the state legislature properly. The utilities are overseen by the Public Service Commission. And the Public Service Commission is a state structure. The members of it are appointed by the governor, and the governor's been very clear more than once, including in this storm, what he expects the PSC to be able to analyze and to investigate. I am not looking to punish people. I'm looking to get a good result here. That's what matters to me. Getting loud and getting mad is only when you run out of options of things to say and do. On this, the second day after the hit of the storm, there is plenty of time for rational understanding of what has to be done, lay it out there, and then start showing how you're reconnecting in the right places so that people have a sense that, yes, things are moving. What you hear, what you see on Facebook, I haven't seen a Con Ed truck all day. Where are these guys? Where they must be someplace. Where are they? And that lack of confidence, that lack of knowing, makes you presume you don't have enough people, they're not working hard enough. All those things start to come into place. And when you're dealing with a person who has already gone through 5 months of COVID in a house, we're on edge. This is a society on edge. Let's be honest. You know, and we have racial justice issues that are at hand. There's serious issues. It's a serious issue in our society, and some people are on edge. And then we have the normal garden variety situations that happen to all of us every day. That's where we are today. From our standpoint, what we intend to do today is make sure we talk with every municipal government and understand where we are. We had a report as of last night that in the village of Pelham, 16% of the community was out of power, 457. In the village of Pelham Manor, 517 were out. That was as of last night. We want to see where we are today. We had a report last night that Dobbs Ferry had 1,025 customers that were out from the local government, and the village hall was out, and the village hall is where the police and fire department is dispatched from. In the town of Bedford, they had 618 out of 153 Con Edison clients, and they have the larger NYSEG group. 4,453 were out on a base of 6,600 customers for NYSEG. And Ossining had 25 to 30% of their community out. Late yesterday, the village mayor of Larchmont told me that she estimated that 70% of Larchmont Village was out. Scarsdale mayor told me last night he thought that about 33% of Scarsdale was out. There's 45 municipalities in Westchester County, and they're all constructed differently. Scarsdale is a classic suburban community. Mount Vernon is a classic urban community, and North Salem is about as rural a community as Westchester County has. So we have a little bit elements of all three. There's a different challenge of reestablishing power in a rural community from a suburban community from an urban community. And so all of those things are part. We want to see that that listing, and when we see that listing, we want to know what manpower is out there, how many crews do you out there that restores the power. And then, similarly, those of us in the general government need to be able to identify how many DPW crews do we have available to do our part of this, which is that middle piece. And Westchester County government has to get its resources, complete whatever work we have in that narrow band that I talked about, Bronx River Parkway and the Grasslands Conservancy, and those that are in parks that affect other people, and then use our resources to back up a municipality that might be overtaxed with their DPW. So we have people who are trained at the county to go out and cut the tree and cut the pole, and that we use our resources to help the municipalities where we can. Final comment, and then obviously you'll have as many questions as you have. We feel like we've been to this dance before. We have. We feel like we've heard all the same things before. We have. The fact that these storms happen and they're never quite what they're expected, you can't blame anybody for that. There are certain projections that are made. I remember over the weekend trying to track the path of this hurricane. I remember speaking to Catherine Chaffee about this. We texted on Saturday and Sunday, what does it look like? Is it going to go landfall? At one point, it was going to go out to sea with a cone that might have swiped the south shore of Long Island. At some point in time, the track of the storm changed. So there's a certain amount of this that you can't blame on anybody, not the utilities, not the governments, and so forth. But once the incident happens, then it is incumbent upon us to react. And we have to be transparent, and we have to be as predictive as we can be in as reasonable a way as possible. People are owed that much. So I'll stop, open it up to questions.
There are a lot of impassable streets in the area. New Rochelle, Bonnet Avenue is a mess. Neighbors say they're not getting any answers from the city or Con Ed. They're concerned if there's an urgency, who's going to be to get to them. What does the county want to do to help those people? Is the county to step in and try and get the streets with fire, EMS, stuff like that?
Well, as you know, I said that right up front. I said the first day of the storm, the most important issue was to clear all of the streets, first the major roadways, and then the secondary streets. And all of them need to be cleared, because if a person is suffering a heart attack on a cul-de-sac, you need to access that person on the cul-de-sac, not just on the main roadways. This particular story of New Rochelle is one of any number of them, and my response to this one is as to all of them. We intend to talk with each of the different municipalities through the balance of the day, identify every single area for which there are streets that are closed and where there are incidents, my word, that represents a fallen tree and wiring, and then determine to allocate resources through the utility company to open up that street. So you mentioned Barnard. I know where it is, on the eastern edge of the Larchmont Woods section of New Rochelle, bordering the town of Mamaroneck. If Barnard Road itself is closed, is it in one place or is it in two places? If it's in one place, is there a detour way around it for traffic? And then you go in to open up the road so that you can benefit the houses that are caught between tree A and tree B that may be cutting off the road. Those are the kind of specifics that I presume the New Rochelle DPW would know. We intend to be in contact with the mayor and the city manager in New Rochelle to address that particular issue. But that's one story, and if you check around, you'll get 25 stories like that.
I have one more. How many county Department of Public Works crews are clearing the streets in New Rochelle, Larchmont?
We're not clear. I just said earlier, let me repeat what I said. The county government's immediate responsibility is to county-owned facilities. We own the Bronx River Parkway. We own the Grasslands campus, which is about 15 or 20 streets in the town of Mount Pleasant, and we have responsibility for the parks. Our primary responsibility, because if we don't do this, nobody else is going to do it, is to clear those areas. Once we clear those areas, which is a relatively small responsibility when compared to a large community, then we will make county resources available to those municipalities that are stressed. Now, New Rochelle's a fairly big city. I don't know how many crews they have available. We will reach out to each of the communities and determine where we can take the crews that we have and then supplement what they're doing to whatever extent is necessary. If New Rochelle feeds back to us and they say, George, we've got it under control, we know where the trees are down, we're making moves, by nightfall we'll clear up all of our streets, and we won't worry about that particular community. You're going to get complaints from individuals depending on where they live. I can tell you right now, the street that I live on, I can't get to my driveway. There's 2 trees down and there's 1 tree here. The 2 here involve electrical. This one does not involve electrical. So I could call the city of Rye and say, hey, get this one out of the way, and then that will open up the road. And they'll say, George, great idea. We've got 6 more urgent situations than that one. But that's why we need to have information shared publicly and easily so everybody can understand. Yes. Sure.
Okay.
Well, okay, go ahead.
Earlier, you mentioned that you spoke to the utility company before the storm and during the storm. At that time, did you have confidence in them being prepared for this storm? And also, you said 2 years ago you lost your temper. Are you losing your temper now?
A little bit by little bit. I think the thing is that you don't lose your temper for show. And it depends on what progress you make toward a goal. And I really do think it's a matter of timing and response to timing. This is 2 days after the incident. 2 days after the incident, I have great concerns. But I also know what the process is and how it has to go. And if progress is made today that's sufficient, then losing your temper is merely just an expression for showtime. I'm not doing it for showtime. But if we're here on day 5, then that's a different situation. If situations doesn't advance, the incident from 2 years ago happened on day 4, day 5. This is day 2, and so we're hopeful to be right about it. When we spoke to the utilities up front, I spoke to a couple of key people that I know in Con Edison. The head of NYSEG reached out to me. They were both very courteous. They indicated that they were making plans of preparation in advance of the storm. I did not envision that it would be this intense. I don't think anybody did. I followed your weather reports in the various stations. They talked about it was going to be intense, but they didn't say this was going to be as big as Superstorm Sandy. Nobody said that. Nobody saw it or predicted it. Having said that, it's how we respond afterwards that matters, and this is the afterwards part. And this is where you say, okay, we didn't anticipate this, but this is how we're going to respond. Yes. Well, those are two questions. The compelling is one thing. Where is the the information flow coming? I only suspect that what the information flow is that senior management at utilities make decisions about how they're going to deploy their resources. They don't call me and say, George, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think we ought to do? They make decisions. They believe they have a wider view. Keep in mind, these utilities have more than Westchester County to serve. The NYSEG service area in Westchester County is very small in comparison to Putnam, Dutchess, and other areas north. The Con Edison area goes into wide swaths of New York City. Now, New York City may not have been hit as hard by this. I did hear that Staten Island, was hit pretty hard by this. But they're making decisions not only about Westchester, but about the other areas of it. So the real question is, as those decisions are being made by the utility company executives, they're looking at the totality of situation. How much information are they going to share as openly as possible with local officials in those areas? That, to me, is the key thing. The liaisons in the various offices in the various local governments are conveying information as they receive it from management back home, in the headquarters. They're not the linkage of problems, and it comes down to whether or not the utility companies can treat us as partners in this and can be as transparent as possible. And we'll see how that plays out in the next couple of days. You asked the second question about enforcement in essence. The enforcement is the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission has to, and they're not going to work in real time, they're going to be a review after the fact. But they have to determine if the performance of these utility companies are satisfactory or not. And it's a premature judgment to make today, 2 days in. We'll see how it plays out over the next couple of days. But I turn immediately, and the governor's already indicated that by his announcement that he's has already ordered a study of the incidents around this. He's already said it's a failure of the utility companies. He said that in his language.
One on, is there any sense that the pandemic and manpower might in any way be related?
Well, I think it probably is, Martin. I mean, the free movement of people is, much more compromised. You never know if a full workforce is available because of people that might have tested positive, might be going through a period of isolation. It probably affects the number of people we can bring in from outside the area. We have a quarantine order in effect for most of the rest of the United States. So if somebody says we're bringing in 100 people from Indiana and Indiana's on the quarantine list, that's above my pay grade, but that's something that has to be rationalized. So I think it does matter. And I do think it matters from the user standpoint, as I said earlier. More people are staying home. More people are working out of home. Just the generic societal edginess of people who've been home for 5 months. This is unknown to all of us. It's unusual to all of us. very little relief. You get hot weather. You don't get air conditioning. You don't even have a fan that can blow. It's understandable why people get angry and get on edge. Even if somebody said to me, is it realistic to think that power would have been restored to all these places in 24 hours? No. But is it realistic to think that there's a public game plan of how it's going to be restored and it's freely shared? Yes. That is a realistic expectation.
The other thing is, you mentioned that we've gotten a lot of complaints also about the loss of internet is that because of shared infrastructure? Because in some cases, people lost their internet yesterday.
Yeah.
And sometimes for others, it's during the storm. Is there a sense that power is being cut, or was there damage as a result?
Well, I don't know the specifics, of each particular incident. My understanding of the utility poles, we call them telephone poles, as I called them when I was a kid. They're utility poles. And usually those utility poles carry a number of different utilities, and I assume somewhere in that mix of where is the high power electrical lines, there's also a line that's used for cable connectivity. Now you have different other mechanisms, there's copper wire and there's now fiber optics, and they operate in somewhat different ways, and they may be conveyed differently. Of course, some people get their internet through some dish capacity, one of the different dish providers, so they're in a different world. But my understanding is that some of those companies, Verizon, Altice, have also, been part of the same mix of communication issues and lack of communication issues that we are concerned about with utility companies. But again, I'm trying to be explanatory and straightforward in that at this point in time, until you know exactly what's out and what the circumstances are, we don't know where to put the finger of direction on. If internet service is out everywhere where power is out, that's one thing. What about areas, and I've heard anecdotes along these lines, I have power, but I don't have internet. Or I have power, but I don't have phone service. If a line is down and on it is the electrical line and somehow it's still working, then why is it that the phone and the internet aren't working? And I don't know the answer to that, but that is something we have to have an answer to. And that is incumbent upon those utility companies, because Verizon is a utility company. Altice is a utility company in the same way. Our water system is a utility company. Other questions?
Thank you.
I have two questions. Hold on. From NBC. One is they want to know what letter grade you would give Con Edison.
Incomplete. I'm not trying to dodge it. As I think I've just said for about, half an hour's worth of time, that today is a day for a full understanding of assessment of the problems. You've had a full day to judge how deep the problems are, solve some of them. We need to know today exactly what the totality of it is, or what's the game plan to fix it, and then in which case you can make a determination of how satisfied we are with the progress that's going to be made.
Okay, the second question is if the county is lending any of its generators to people who don't have power.
Well, right now what we're trying to do is figure out how to take what resources we have and provide it through the municipal governments. Because in a county of almost 1 million people, and whatever number of generators we have, we could give them away in an hour for usage by individuals, and that would be it. I think we want to, again, do exactly what we talked about. Where are the greatest needs? Work them out through the municipalities. I suspect that wherever we do, we'll get our material out there in the community as well. We'll do it where the greatest need is. So if somebody says there's a nursing home and they need a more powerful generator, we have the generator and it's going to deal with 200 people who are ill and need the power, that is the more likely place we'd use it. Okay. Any other questions? If not, thank you all for your time. You can reach out to Catherine thereafter for any follow-up. This is a work in progress, so by 4 o'clock today we may know things we don't know now. But thank you all for coming. Stay safe.